Back in the 1980s, the annual visit of the offshore powerboat roadshow brought a buzz to New Brighton. For the hundreds of thousands of spectators who regularly made the pilgrimage, the sound of screaming outboards and thundering inboards were part of their way of life. But then the combination of redevelopment and recession denied them the opportunity and effectively distinguished the resort as a major venue. This year, however, things have changed. New Brighton now boasts a sparkling new promenade, and a council determined to bring back the punters to this once great seaside town. The result was the Wirral Class 2 Championship, supported by corporate communications and U-Hire, and designed to reincarnate the town as a top British venue. This year's pilot event attracted many top names, including Class 1 champion Roger Fletcher in Shockwave, and Class 2 Championship leader David Allenby in Assegai 4. Allenby, after a miserable season by his standards in 1992, is in very good form, and the mechanical gremlins that plagued his boat for so long appear to have finally deserted him. His boat, a 36-foot Tornado, is powered by 4 XR2 Mercury outboard engines, developing almost 800 horsepower.
As you know, last year we were blowing up a lot of engines, and we've devised a new fuel system which guarantees a solid charge of fuel to all the motors all the time, and a special water pickup. So I figured out the problem had to be one of those or both. And since then we haven't had any engine damage, but only 5 races. We've also changed the bottom of the boat a bit to make it run a little bit flatter. It seems to be working, and we really tried it yesterday for 20 miles. It seems to be fine, yeah.
How's the boat suited to the sort of conditions you're going to find in this championship here?
It's always mixed running here. A little bit of quiet water and always the overfull currents at the mouth of the estuary. And then the bigger stuff offshore, so it's a large boat, so it ought to be able to cope with everything, depending on the wind force, but I think today should be fine.
The event also attracted an American, Charles Burnett III. He used to drive drag boats back home in the States, but since taking up UK residence has shown a liking for offshore. This year he's moved up from the smaller 4-litre class and is now sporting a high-powered Class 2 outfit.
Charles, perhaps first you could tell us a little bit about the new boat you've got across here.
This is a new used model that came to us via France, and we had quite a bit of re-rigging to do. It's done, I believe, 3 races in France, but we think we've got most of the boats knocked out that have plagued us at the beginning of the season.
You're quite hopeful here today that it's going to be up with the other cats?
I am. It's a good, very good rough water boat, and as you can see, we've got lids on our canopies as well, so we can actually do a little submarining and put the periscope up and carry on regardless.
Now, what are the conditions going to be like today?
Conditions, I understand, will be similar to yesterday, which is pretty nasty out the mouth of the river. And in fact, yesterday we never even got onto the long legs, so it could be a really interesting run out there. Allenby's have a little bit of length on us, but we'll give them hell anyway.
Norway's entrant was more used to driving in a 2-litre boat than a Class 2. He comes from a country renowned for producing fearless competitors in offshore, with clearly relishing the prospect of proving that Britain doesn't always rule the waves.
I've been racing Class 3, 2-litre for 7 years, and that's good. Yes, it's a big class in Norway.
Can you tell us a little bit about the boat you're running over here in this competition?
Yes, this is a 25-foot pontoon with 2-litre XR2s on. Yes, and it's a very good rough weather boat.
I believe you've got a slightly different role this time when you're over here than you normally have.
Yeah, I normally do the job behind the steering wheel. I like that position best, but now I had to be a navigator, yes. Because the owner of the boat want to drive him himself, and of course he knows the boat better than I do.
Another British entrant was Martin Mansbridge. He's comparatively new to Class 2, and although his boat wasn't the newest afloat, it certainly sported most of the latest technology. But the aging Cougar was designed for speed in flat conditions, and he was aware there would be very little of that.
She's a 26-foot Cougar, originally built in '84. We put the canopies on this year for the 207 rule, and runs quite well, but could do with it a bit calmer today.
How's the season been going so far?
A few problems. We put a hole in the tunnel on the first race and a fair bit of engine trouble, but fingers crossed we get it together for later on.
Are these conditions suiting you or not?
Not particularly, no. It's a bit too rough for us today. The longer boats can plough through it a bit better.
With the news that after 70 grueling miles in round one, only 2 boats survived the onslaught of the Irish Sea. The American Charles Burnett just ahead of UK #1 David Allenby in Assegai 4. Now they would do battle again in the final round, but it was clear that if anything, conditions had worsened and would take an inevitable toll. However, 5 crews in Class 2 had managed to salvage their battered boats from round 1 and were prepared to have another go in round 2. They would be joined by the normal Class 3 fleet, plus Roger Fletcher's Class 1 giant Shockwave. But even for this 50-foot monster, the sight of the rolling swells whipped up by a fresh westerly wind was a daunting one. And as the crews made their way down the river at the start towards the open seas, they were to get a first taste of the task ahead. David Allenby had decided the best place to be in Class 2 was out front. He had the advantage of the longest boat, and the theory was to break the spirit, if not the boats of the opposition, before they had an opportunity to mount a challenge. And from early on in the race, his decision looked a good one as the rest of the fleet dropped further behind. Mansbridge's race strategy was also clear. The short boat had no chance of outracing Allenby or Burnett, so he would plod on and wait for them to make the mistakes. Out front, though, and literally in a class of his own, Fletcher was enjoying the type of conditions that his boat was made for. There was no competition, but a great deal of satisfaction for Fletcher, who had repeatedly confounded the pundits who claimed his decision to race a monohull in favour of a faster catamaran was a miscalculation. Having said that, Allenby in the 36-foot Tornado Cat wasn't that far behind him. And he too had faced scepticism concerning boat decisions and engine configuration, but knows the best way to answer your critics is to keep on winning, and he has a habit of doing just that. But his main consideration on this particular day was just to keep ahead. Although Burnett had won the first heat, the second in this one would not be good enough for the American if Allenby won it. In a tied situation, the winner of the longest race picks up the title, and this one was 130 miles compared with 70 on the previous day. In third position, Mansbridge was still harbouring championship aspirations. If neither of the leaders could make the finish line, then he had the opportunity, and that wasn't quite as silly as it might have appeared. However, all that could have been history shortly afterwards when Mansbridge found the perfect ramp and almost went into orbit. Fortunately, he kept the power on and just kept the nose down. Another look at the incident shows how close Mansbridge had come to an early bath and how useful a heavy right foot can be on the odd occasion. Meanwhile, Fletcher, unaware of the drama behind, was still averaging over 80 miles per hour in front, almost relaxing in the flatter waves of the estuary, then accelerating through the rougher sections offshore. These were tailor-made conditions for the former Class 2 world champion and his co-pilot, John Hampton. But the main interest for the large crowd was the lead in Class 2. At the end of the previous lap, Allenby had been well in control, and it was he who appeared first, but something was very wrong. The boat was slowing to a crawl and was heading for the beach. He was clearly in trouble. The boat was sinking, and Allenby had little choice but to beach it, It was either that or try and get back to the crane and risk sinking completely, although there was always the danger here of being swamped. He explained how the continuous pounding had finally taken its toll and delivered the knockout punch to his championship chances.
Just as we came round the buoy there, happened very quickly.
So it wasn't the rough waters offshore?
Yeah, that's probably what did it.
Yeah.
I don't know what, we got a hold somewhere, but I don't know where.
Well, you just started thinking.
Yeah. Just that starboard sponson just didn't pick up, and we've been around long enough to know what that meant.
And the pictures show just how close he came to sinking. But while one offshore favourite bowed out, another was in the making. In his first offshore Class 3 event, Howie Lucas's 2-litre Frode monohull was orchestrating his own version of the form book. And with just one lap to go, he was well in control. For the crowd, it was welcome entertainment. By now, 16 of the 20 starters were in a state of retirement, and there was getting less and less to celebrate. Although the sight of a struggling 2-litre cat was evidence enough that on this particular day, the sea would always be the eventual winner. But there was the odd highlight to savour. The scarred restaurateur Steve Hoare in TX Control certainly made a meal of this, and almost got his just desserts. But as with Manstridge on the previous incident, he was keeping the power on, and that saved the boat. And Hoare, clearly shaken but certainly not stirred, continued into the last lap. Another look shows in fact that Hoare was slightly unlucky. Having been launched by the first wave, he managed to bring the boat down only to be embedded in the second. He was extremely unlucky to emerge without considerable damage to the boat and crew. It is the one situation that a powerboat driver fears most. There's very little warning and very little you can do, apart from bring the boat down as best you can and then hope. Right behind, Roger Fletcher was duly completing his allotted distance and celebrated with a burst of full throttle. Still well over 80 miles per hour, and still enjoying every minute of it as he passed the stricken Ascot 4, now high and dry on the sand. Next over the line, and sometime later, was the local hero, Howie Lucas. First race, first in 2-litre, and second overall. Not a bad day's work. Where so many had floundered, he had conquered. Maybe with a little help of local knowledge, but even so, it was a very, very good result indeed. By now, the Class 2 fleet was decimated. Burnett did cross the finishing line eventually, with just a little help from his friend, and to everyone's knowledge became the first man to win a championship in this fashion, by virtue of his first heat win, and the failure of any other Class 2s to complete the course on the second day. He was the winner, and then explained that things didn't really go right from the start.
It was pretty rough, but we had every chance of handling it nicely. Head on the start, we not lost one engine, and on restarting, confused the GPS and threw it out completely. So Peter was really relying on his knowledge of the course and watching the boys, and we had almost no electrical power on the left engine, so it would come on intermittently, which of course made the boat go left and right quite suddenly. Peter was busy yanking the wheel back and forth to try and keep us on course, and the right side started to lose power, which caused us to slow down enough where several waves buried us, added to the fun. It blew the tape off both the canopies and flooded him like a hose pipe. We got pretty wet and cold, but unfortunately came within 5 miles of finishing. But next year.
Will you please welcome...
Well, it really was a funny day. The winner took his title without needing to finish. A 2-litre finished second overall, and only 3 finished altogether. So we could only really leave you with an American celebrating in a European victory. Otherwise, it would all be illogical. And by the way, it was good to be back in the Wirral for what many hope will be the first of bigger and better events. And I, for one, will certainly agree with that.